Today, I put head-to-head GPT-5 and Claude Opus 4.1 in Cursor in a real-life competition to see which one of them will work better to create an actual useful project. The project that we created is investment opportunity analyzer based on the real housing market data, and it can be useful for people making decisions. The point of this exercise was to ask both of them the same things and to see how they perform. You would be surprised with the end results. We shaped the whole PRD with the Docker, with databases, with frontend, with backend, with API, with all of that jazz. Based on this PRD that they both used, and it was identical basically, we then took it and gave them the tasks to execute on, then looked at the results and the progress of how that was going. So enjoy watching that. So we have this data set of Zillow data. These are pretty big CSV files that contain a whole bunch of information about housing market in the US and globally. And I've run a separate analysis to analyze this data set, what fields are included and what are the potential use cases, etc. And what I want to do now, and we're obviously in Cursor, right? I don't need to explain that. If I do, then take a look at Cursor. Very useful thing. But anyway, what I want to do is I want the GPT-5 and Opus 4.1 to create PRDs for the project. And then based on these PRDs, create, well, basically the actual application. And we will see the results and we will compare and see what works better. Now, the first step that we need to take is to create the actual PRDs. And I thought about maybe I should have one PRD for both of them, but at the end decided that actually we're gonna ask both of them to generate PRDs, and then we're gonna select one of them, but we also see how they're approaching the PRD creation with the same exact task. Let's get started. What is that exactly that I want to do with this data set? Let's put it simply as a top-level task. I'm going to use Whisperflow to talk to my cursor and to create a task. I would like you to come up with a very detailed project requirement documentation, PRD, that would specify the system that I will describe below. Whisperflow is a transcription tool that turns my speech into text in Cursor. Very useful as well. I would like you to use Zillow real estate dataset, details of which I will provide to you, to create an application that allows to analyze the market from different perspectives, but specifically to create value to users, to identify the areas with the highest investment opportunity. I want you to use a large language model, say Gemini 2.5, that's what I use, to come up with the design of the application and a multi-agent system or just agentic system that would analyze this data set in a way to understand the best presented investment opportunity based on the most recent data. And then create a user interface that would allow a user to see and understand what is happening and make their choices. Now, this should be a single page application. It should have a backend done with Python. It should have a super basic user management with the, say, SQLite database on the backend, just for simplicity. It should be deployable in Docker, and we're going to test it locally. You need to make a choice with regards to the framework to use for the front-end design and choose how this is going to look. Let's start with a super basic authentication where we just need to enter admin and password to get in. This is not the full point of this application. Let's go on with the requirements definition. Okay, so it needs to use LangChain as the main architecture for the agentic system. The Gemini API key should be configured in .env file. So basically, I don't care which framework it uses on the backend for the agentic system. And really, I mean, LangChain, I think I roughly describe most of the application that I wanted to achieve, and we can take a look at the PRDs. The only couple of things I will add now are the following. I want you to present a nice dashboard to a user with this data, showing them the overview picture of the market, maybe by different regions. Now, use context 7 for the documentation on whatever frameworks, technologies, and libraries you use, and save the resulting PRD into MD file. Okay, so context 7 is a MCP that allows to get most recent docs on different services, and it's connected to my cursor, so it will know it is there. Now I need to quickly glance through this thing and also drop the dataset description in the context. The reason I want to look through that is because sometimes the Whisper Flow makes mistakes, or my pronunciation is not good enough for it. Okay, that seems to be clear. Now let's take that one, copy it, and I'm going to start GPT-5 Max with thinking on that. I hope it's up, actually, because I guess everybody is now jumping on board. Now we're turning on Claude Opus thinking, Opus 4.1, and giving it exactly the same task, just no difference at all. The only thing I want to make sure that they both don't start creating files with the same names. I will give a second to OpenAI to run that. Okay, folks, we are back. Both completed their PRD creation. Now let's take a look at what has been created and make our call and maybe request some changes. So let's start with GPT. It was the first one to complete this thing. I want to switch to the markdown mode and go through that a little bit. So product overview. Goal, help users identify US regions, national and state at the highest near-term investment opportunity using Zillow datasets. It looks like in this exact data set, they only have US, which is fine. Background data, okay, gives background on the data, users and use cases, identifies tasks and personas. That's a good product side analysis. Non-goals, brokerage workflow, success metrics, time to insight, usability, that's fine. System architecture, front-end SPA, it shows React over here. Apache chains, fast API for Python, good. SQL alchemy, okay. Agentic analysis, LangChain plus LangGraph, possibly. That works as well. During the generation of those, which both took around the same time, 4.1 took a little longer. It did go to read the documentation on various tools, which is a great thing. It adds me a lot of confidence. Let's see if that was meaningfully included in the PRDs. So system architecture, secrets.env, Google APK, containerization, Docker. That all sounds sensible. Then detailed requirements. Okay, authentication, data ingestion, stores, KPIs and features. Yeah, I do feel overall it's going heavily on the business side, which is a good thing, I guess. Rent growth, investment opportunity score. Components, initial weights, tangible via.env, price monetization, rent dynamics, inventory signal. Okay, good. Agentic analysis, LangChain plus Gemini. Turn metrics into expansion risk and actionable nodes. Architecture supervises down. Okay, it created fairly complex agentic system. So it starts with the screener agent that runs feature compounding and ranking. Probably make it larger a little bit for everybody to see. Validation agent. Oh, Jesus, come back. Change data sufficiency and flags missing metrics. Narrative agent generates concise explanation for region. It's fairly complex. I want to simplify that actually. We'll do that. If we go with that option, we will do some work on this PRD. Tools exposed to agents, query, compute features. It defines the API, then it defines the front end with the dashboard and regional detail. Data model, super basic data model with the database, algorithms and calculations. UX requirements, performance, security and privacy, obviously observability, deployment, milestones. It went managerial here. API schemas, front-end components. Very good, actually, high-level definition. I think that's pretty well designed. This is a meaningful description and it makes a lot of sense. Now let's see what Claude did. If we compare it side by side, this one was 238 lines, and something tells me that Claude is, as always, freaking crazy, over 1,000 lines on this PRD. I don't know if it's a good side or bad side. It's up to you to judge. Both models are top line. There's nothing better that is publicly available that can do things like Opus 4.1 or GPT-5. It seems it's pretty obvious that Claude family of models is really verbose. It has a lot to say about anything and everything. And the problems that it creates is when it actually goes and creates a lot of unnecessary stuff that wasn't actually asked for. We have to slow him down all the time and put additional restrictions around that. It seems like it's a strategy that Anthropic took, that they can stimulate this model to more verbose completions to cover more of than what user is asking for. It's like they really give you more. That's the thinking. They give you more than other models if you ask. But I'm not sure it's always good. It depends on the workflow and what you're working on. For me, it's a frustrating day-to-day issue with both Sonnet and Opus. They're just too much sometimes. And it seems like we're seeing the same exact thing here. Let's look at this PRD for the Opus. Product vision. The platform combines comprehensive market data Zillow with target users, real estate investment. It's the same structure it was before. Okay, high-level architecture. We got also React front-end with dashboard compute. Okay, with the backend on all service API endpoints, WebSocket handler. Oof, too much for the prototype. I should have told them both that this is a POC kind of engagement, but let's do that afterward. Simplify that. Data layer, SQLite, Gemini. Yeah, it makes sense. Front end, React, backend, FastAPI. All right, length chain. Let's see if it overcomplicated the agentic part or not. Functional requirements, authentication, user management. Board features, national statistics, regional heat map, top investment opportunities. Let me see what this one had about the interface. Why is it not searching in Markdown? KPI cards, e-charts time series. All right, that's more of the high-level definition of the interface. I'm looking for something more functional. Yeah, it looks like it's doing the KPI charts, market chart, and top opportunities table. Very similar to this one, actually. Now, let's go back here. Yep, dashboard, detailed analysis view, time series charts, analysis. I mean, it all makes sense at a high level. Then we need to dig into very specific likes and dislikes about the use case. I prefer to see what it comes out with and then make a judgment. What is that I don't like over there already on this sort of product side? Now, AI agent system. Let's see what we have here. Role, coordinate multi-agent workflow tools. And let's see, it's got data analyst agent. Time series analysis, content, data manipulation, and by. Okay, so it kind of described types of the analysis to be made. Also pretty far, it's pretty complex, but we will simplify it when we get there. Price appreciation. It underlines very specific fields to look at. Report generation agent and separate agent for the report. I wouldn't be doing it this way. It goes to the API endpoint description and to the code. We start seeing the code and a lot of it. Then we have some market deep dive, some examples of the UI. The other one also gave examples of the UI. Then we get the code. Okay, so that's interesting. We also get prompts over here, which is great. The other one also gave the prompt, but this one goes in a lot more detail. For some reason, Opus decided that it wants to give me basically everything in one document. I don't think I like it that much. I think it's a bit over what I was asking for and what I was hoping for. It is harder for me to validate that it has done it correctly. I think I will take the PRD from the ChatGPT as it's more high level, and I'm gonna create a new chat and ask it to simplify it, assuming that this is the proof of concept. Let's see what happens. I want you to simplify this PRD, assuming that we're building the proof of concept, and remove all the unnecessary parts that are not necessary for the proof of concept. I do want to still have the database, basic AI agents, front end, and dashboards in place. This should be considered the first prototype. Make appropriate changes. Now it's gonna think a little bit and make changes into the PRD, and we're gonna take this PRD and see how agents deal with that. Okay, so GPT simplified this thing, and we now have short and sweet POC definition for the insights. Now let's start the competition. I will create two folders, GPT-5 and Opus 41. And I'm going to put the data in each of them separately, just so the agents were staying within a folder. And I'm going to put PRD in each of them separately as well. Done. And now we're gonna start both of the agents. Let's clean this up a little bit. I'm not gonna go too fancy over here. Just gonna go on GPT-5, select the one, add the PRD, and actually I'm just gonna rename it to PRD for the fair game, just to keep everything completely independent, with no extra variables affecting them. Okay, please review the PRD. In the data folder, you have the actual dataset and the CSV files along with the documentation about the dataset. What I want you to do is to implement this project based on the PRD for the proof of concept. Follow the PRD strictly and try to not do things that I haven't asked you to do. All right. So what I'm gonna do here is once it starts doing stuff, I'm gonna put it in autonomous mode. It will keep doing that until it finishes and tells me that everything is complete. Then we'll need to set up variables and see a result. You can see both of them are going, and one of them already had a plan, review the dataset files, project structure, create API endpoints. Okay. So it starts with the data ingestion. Oh, Jesus, I forgot to tell it something. I'm going to cancel both of them and add one more thing. Use context 7 for the up-to-date documentation to libraries if you need it. Okay. So let's start it again. That should be it. I'm gonna put them in the autonomous mode and let's come back when they have done something. So we're somewhere in the middle of generation, like a few minutes in, probably 3 minutes in. And I already see the problems with GPT-5. It has problems using the tooling that Cursor provides, while our Claude Opus is running like crazy and already created a couple dozen files, or at least a dozen. What happens on the GPT-5 side is that it is failing to change the file, it's failing to create something. Clean start. Okay, it is time to come back because in about 9 minutes, or with Opus got to the point of actually trying to run the application. It starts to install the virtual environment and all of that. It created the README file, while GPT-5 is still creating files. So clearly Opus is at least faster, but let's see about the rest. Now it's tackling some issues with the installation of the requirements, so let's give it a minute to figure this out. Okay, it looks like in about 12 minutes, Opus completed its task and created the whole project structure with the backend, frontend files, and start script. Wonderful. Now let's take a look at GPT-5. GPT-5 is so far still at the stage of creating a whole bunch of code. I understand that it can be related to the fact that it just launched and people are just basically hammering on it right now. So I hope their GPUs have a lot of cooling. Let's start looking at what Opus actually created and see if we can test that. To ease up the task for him, I will recreate a new chat and start working with this project from within this chat. But first, let me take a look at a few things. So what do we have on the backend? We already have venv. It did install the venv. It didn't have any packaging or anything, and it put .env file here, which I need to update with the Google API key. I will do that. Cool. Have code for the dashboard, for the ingestion. Good. Wonderful. And then we have frontend folder, which is where we have the main page. And then we have README and start script. Okay. Python virtual. Okay, it starts like its own little server. Wonderful. I wonder if it used any kind of API there or not. It's got the models. Yeah, it did use the API. It just starts it on its own. Good. Super. Now we're gonna close this one. And while GPT-5 is still working, we're gonna create a new tab over here in Cursor. I'm gonna give it the whole folder and say that it needs to figure out what's going on inside. So let's give it a try. Please take a look at the README and understand the project and what has been implemented. I want you to fully test the project and fix the problems if you run into any of them. I will use the same exact prompt later for GPT-5, and we'll see what happens. I just set the API key into .env file, and we can start that. Oh, of course, we need to switch it to Opus over here before we go ahead with anything. So far, it looks all ahead in terms of the speed. This guy is still working. Wonderful. Okay, you see what's happening. The file has the constant problem with Cursor recently, since they started not allowing the agent to look at the .env files. It thinks that it's not there and is trying to create it every time. That's a bit of a challenge. So it has a to-do item to create and configure .env. Let's see if it can figure this out. I'm gonna need to come back and replace the API key again, as long as it's happy. Of course, it tries to start it again. No, it's not gonna fly. I wanted to do everything in one fly. That's why I'm gonna specify over here. .env file is already in place. You just don't see that, so there's no need to create it. All right, let's go this way. Hopefully that helps. All right, it looks like GPT-5 is approaching the end of creating this thing. Yep, it's writing some instructions. It looks pretty fast. Maybe it just did more thinking than Opus. But anyway, it took about 18 minutes for the GPT-5 to complete that. So wonderful. Let's take a look what we have over here. Very similar backend in terms of the structure, but we'll see if it actually works. No .env file as far as I can see, but maybe this is expected. We'll figure this out. And frontend, kind of very similar to what the other one created, so it's very difficult to tell the difference. I think just to put them on equal terms, I will ask this one to create a sample.env file so I can fill it up and then start debugging. I cannot find .env file template in the project structure. Are we using .env? And if we are, please create an example file that I can fill up with the actual keys. All right. There's a little problem. I need to come back again because I already have things running on these ports, so it wouldn't start correctly. So I'm going to ask it to run the API on a different port. Please run API on the port 7777. I don't know why, just whatever. Okay, and this guy is still thinking. All right, it created .env example. Wonderful. Now I'm going to fill it up and we will come back. Okay, I filled up .env and now we can close this chat and create a new one. I'm going to move it a little bit because it makes sense to have GPT-5 in the beginning to not mix it up. I'm going to take the same exact prompt, except for I'm going to change the folder. Let's go, but I'm going to change the port to 7. Yeah, just keep them near each other. 7778. No, it's going to be 4 6s. I don't know why, because I want to. All right, let's come back here and see what's happening. It kept making some of the changes because I asked it to change it to the port number. And now it's trying to actually start that and see what's happening. All right, it didn't take off from the first attempt. That's fine. Claude finished. It did some work around the code and misunderstood me a little bit. Although I did tell it to run API on 7.7 and he ran the actual frontend on 51.73, which is totally fine. Now, it successfully completed testing and fixing as far as it says. The current status is the backend API is 4.7, the frontend is running here. Cool. Let's go and check what it built. All right, so this is the localhost 5173. Let's see if my admin password thing is gonna work. No, it didn't, so I need to check what credentials should I use to log in. Maybe I missed that. Oh, admin. Yeah, I did miss that. I was lazy. Let's go. So we're in. And what do we have here? We have a list of top investment opportunities split by the region based on the calculation of the z-score, rent z-score, inventory, and risk z-score. And we have one region, which is somewhere in Illinois, that has a 100 score. And if we click on it, we see more details, such as the breakdown of the score, home, and the charts with the actual home values, rental prices, and housing inventory. So if I understand it anyway, then Basically, home values are growing over here up until, oh, interesting. Okay, so it allows me to nicely look at the data, but the last data over here, it has from month 4, 2025, which is probably as recent as we can get it. This chart with rental prices also goes down, and the housing inventory clearly goes down as well. Since I don't understand anything in this z-scores and how it estimated that, I cannot give you a proper judgment on whether it actually worked correctly, but let's look at how the agent was implemented and how this analysis is being done. Okay, that's interesting. It has all these rent coggers and price coggers with percentages. So if they are correct, and it's actually making a judgment based on this data, then this is quite a useful thing to work with. Let's take a look at the least appealing. It's got definitely lower, oh, it's not least appealing, it's 82. Score is pretty high anyway, but there's a high risk. And we can see a lot more ups and downs on the housing inventory. Without diving deep into that, assuming the data is correct, this is very impressive. This is like a whole application based on the real life data set that has been created. Let's take a look at Illinois. We see the lower scores over here, all the way to the lowest scores. For some reason, it's not giving me the information. Let's do it again. This particular page is not opening for whatever reason. Maybe the different one will open. Yeah, I guess it's a blip. You can see the difference over here. Returns are much lower and the investment score is much lower, 71. I actually have no idea why. Let's take a look. Please explain how your agent within the system works and what data it requests from the LLM, if any. Also explain how the overall investment score is calculated based on the z-scores. In the meantime, let's take a look at what GPT-5 is doing. All right, it wants me to execute something. I see the virtual environment. It's also not too verbose in the communication, so it's just not telling me anything. It's just doing job. Sometimes I do want them to tell me something when they jump into this mode of I'm just gonna do things. Obviously, that's not great. All right, it started testing something. Now let's look what's going on here. Narrative generation. The system used narrative agent that leverages Google Gemini Flash 2.0 Flash Try. I should tell it to use a better model. Generate investment insights. We have a data collection part. Then the context preparation part. As far as I understand, this part is fully deterministic. Price growth rate. So yeah, it does some calculations, and then LLM interaction was temperature, system pronto. 1 sentence summary, 3-5 bullet points, key metric references. I don't see this anywhere. I don't see the results anywhere. All right, z-scores, that's clear. I don't think I see any results of the LLM work on the interface. No descriptions or bullet points or anything. I'm just gonna give it a screenshot just in case. I only see the numbers here. Okay, let's go back here. So far it's handling the application startup issues, which are clearly there. Looking at the logs, not finding anything. All right, it curls the actual health check of the API. It seems like it is healthy. That's good. So I'm displaying basic fallback data. Let me check the front end. Okay, front end code looks correct. Definitely a narrative endpoint displaying the results. Okay, it finds the issue is on the server side. The issue, the system is falling back to a basic template because Gemini isn't properly configured. Looking at the response, or the okay, for some reason the API key was reset somewhere on the backend, so I will update it and come back to this. I have set the API key for Google Gemini. I also want you to change the model and use Gemini 2.5 Flash rather than 2.0. Once you make these changes, redeploy the application and let's see the full report. You can hear me talking to AI. I don't need to explain anything. All right, this guy is done. GPT-5 is done finally. Let's take a look. What I did, installed backend and started API in port 666, fixed missing dependencies, result CSV ingestion. Server is running, health. Defaulted to started the server. Okay, this is wonderful. Where is the front end running and how can I see that? So, I mean, overall, it definitely took a lot more time to work with the 5. I still haven't seen the results. We need to check if they're going to be any comparable, but something tells me that it's not going to be great. All right, now it reads the front-end data. From the configuration, confirm this. All right, so it just basically doesn't know where the front end is. That tells me that it didn't actually properly understand the project. It hung up on the backend and kind of solved the start of the API, but didn't get to the front end. And now it only is kind of recovering the context for understanding that. So, okay, that's a minus for GPT-5 for sure. This guy restarted. It made a bit of a change into the model. And let's go. And now let's go and see the actual results. It completed the redeployment. I'm talking about Opus. And now let's go take a look at the results. I'm just going to refresh this page. Admin. Oh my God. Now we're running into login issues. That part often happens in the coding process. It breaks something along the way. So that's a challenge. Now we need to fix that. I assume it might be related to the fact that I changed the .n file, but that means that it's storing that maybe incorrectly. It didn't bring up the backend yet, or didn't bring it up correctly. So that was my fault. I'm taking that back. And it wants to curl it on its own, but I don't need that. Not every region is opening for some reason. There's still no data over here, only numerical data. But I think it realized it itself. So let's see how it handles that. Models become more and more capable now of keeping in context both the backend and the front end of the application. It's not always beneficial from a flow perspective to work on those at the same time or to keep them together, but for this experiment and the POC, that's perfectly fine. This is actually funny because it looks like GPT-5 picked up the same exact port as for the front end as Opus 4.1. So I'm going to have to ask it to change it because that's not going to work. Change the port of the front end to 5174. And restart the application, please, and make sure that it's actually running and working. All right, so I'll let it work. What's going on here is it's making some more changes on the Opus side and validating that it's functioning. Oh my God, this guy is a deep thinker. I think it is trying to curl the website. Now it's querying the API. And finding an error there clearly. Let's see. All right, that's interesting. It executes custom-made scripts. Runs into some sort of error, but my feeling is that it's not understanding correctly what is going on, why this error is there. All right, so the data is actually there. That's good. So the data is actually being generated. I think now it realized what the problem is. Yep. I think that's right. All right, what's going on here? It seems like it made the changes. I'm talking about GPT-5 and restarted the server. I hope so. I know how we're going to validate the data. If we end up seeing the same insights in the same top regions, that's going to be a guarantee that both of them chose the right approaches and they're working consistently. But if they're different, then one of them is clearly not right. Keeps figuring out the startup. So now it's basically started the backend server. It's trying to find some logs that don't exist. I need to ensure we complete the user's representative. It's not a good feeling. Clearly, Opus is far ahead right now. We're fixing data exchange issues between frontend and backend. Finally, hooray. We have the app there and it is running. Let's go take a look. Something very similar. Come on, admin. It's not logging in this way. What credentials should I use to log in into the service? So interesting that both of the systems actually chose blue and white colors for the color scheme, which is fine. All right, this one's down. As you can see in this session, I'm just letting them do their stuff. If they want to hallucinate, they will hallucinate. It created a more complicated password, but it doesn't work. I failed to log in with these credentials and I see no error messages. There's a chance that this is the front end that is not working correctly. What do we have here? It's checking the logs, it's running the scripts. It's doing a lot actually. Too much probably. None of them have successfully completed the task yet. This one's missing the proper LLM integration. This one is, I don't know what this one is doing. All right, so it looks like the web server is down so far. This one is in place, but the Opus one is down. It feels like it kind of entered this state of overloaded context and it needs a bit of a reset. I will give it another minute or two to see what's happening. Admittedly, this is not the easiest project that can be done correctly from one shot or a couple of steps, but I think leading models are now reaching this point when they can actually do that. Looks like it's hanging. 5173. This one's still down. Okay, looks like user interface is down. We need to redeploy that. That's not the first time I run into that. It really thinks that 2.5 doesn't exist. I'm using 1.5 Flash because that's what I know. But whatever, let it be 1.5 Flash. I'm not going to complain. I'm just going to ask it to redeploy it to make sure that we actually have something to look at. All right. Looks like it was stuck. Okay, looks like it's just the server that kind of stopped. And then it's going to curl it. I'm assuming it's going to work. Yeah. Right. Look at that. It actually works. So it's taking time right now because it's loading the data from the LLM when I'm opening the page. It does give a clear picture. It presents a strong investment opportunity with high growth potential despite a slightly elevated price to rent ratio. I start to trust the frontier models with this kind of questions more and more. All right. Let's look at some of the bad ones. Let's open some random area over here. Presents a moderate investment opportunity with potential for application, but requires further analysis due to data gaps. Okay, so just basically not enough data for this particular ones. We are especially missing the rental data for them. So maybe that's what actually confuses it. What is also confusing me is that there's no way to paginate properly on the main page. Balanced risk profile. Well, it looks like a very basic analysis right now, but it's a question of the prompt. In principle, it seems to be working as expected. For the POC, this is a strong, probably 8 out of 10 for what I was looking to achieve. So I'm gonna reject that and ask it to introduce pagination into the table and some more sophisticated ability to filter and sort various regions. When you're done, redeploy the app. All right. I'm going to restart the forward. Okay, it's restarting. Wonderful. Now I need to remember what was the password. Yeah, test pass 123. All right. Showtime. Let's take a look at the console logs. A bunch of JS problems here. It doesn't seem to work properly. The login button still doesn't do anything, and I get a bunch of errors in the JavaScript console. Take a look. If it fails to fix that, I'm probably going to ask Opus to fix that. And I'm pretty sure that it will. We will see sort of the results of the GPT-5. But no, despite the hype and their, what they said that this is going to supposedly beat Opus, it's not happening. It is not happening. Not yet. It's unsafe port restriction. Maybe it's not that bad. We still need to see the data. That one was funny when it was like, nope, the Gemini 2.5 doesn't exist yet, so I'm going to use 1.5. Funny little creature. Okay. Looks like it's back up. Again, I need that freaking password with the exclamation mark. I'm not going to remember that. Yay, we logged in. Hooray. All right, that's fair. Let's take a look now at what we have. So, initial impressions. Let's redeploy them side by side. It's gonna need to rerun the npm. It's okay. I hope it's not running with Opus and not changing the model in the middle of the... Oh, okay, this is the wrong one. This is the GPT-5 one. I need to open our Sonnet. All right, let's give it a try. Yeah, it loaded up. Cool, so now we can compare those folks side by side. On the left-hand side, we've got what our Opus came up with. And on the right-hand side, the first one was always GPT-5. How do I split them? Okay, separate all tabs. Can I do it this way? Yep. Right, so GPT-5 on the left and Opus 4.1 on the right. We already looked at Opus in a lot of details. We know that the LLM integration, the Gentic integration works and does return some basic overview. The data is displayed very nicely and all sorts of good components are used. I have not validated if the calculations are correct, but I'm pretty sure they are, and maybe actually there's a couple of bugs that need to be fixed. Now let's look at the 5. So first of all, I don't see region name. So there's definitely less thinking that was put into actually making it work. Again, it's sorted in the same order based on the score. The score is clearly calculated in a different way, or maybe returns a different data. And it's got these indexes over here, so it's very hard to identify which state and which entity it is to compare. If we open any given random region over here, we see that home value and random missing can be possible because we saw the same stuff happening on some of the other regions. So yes, all 3 charts are working. The charts are meaningfully user-friendly. The design of the page I don't like, just simplistic. It's at the pretty basic level, whereas actually Opus generates much better user experience, I'm guessing. It's just more appealing. Let's click this generate narrative thing and see if that works. And it does work, but it looks more like a console output rather than an interface of the system. Let's go to conclusions. The hype about Claude being beaten by GPT-5 is completely overwhelmed. In this scenario that I described, where we took the PRD, the same identical PRD, gave it to both system in parallel, example, queried in them in exactly the same time, gave them the same files and conditions. The timing is much worse for GPT-5. It spends more time fixing its own errors. The final output from the product perspective is way better on the Opus than on the GPT-5. Yeah, honestly, there's not much to. It's similar, but just the user interface and user experience in that is way worse by default. So my choice is still Opus 4.1. It added the pagination that I was asking for and the search options. That's the conclusion. I think it was a fairly complex project to evaluate those two. And yeah, as I said, my choice is on the Opus side right now.